Hey, Baruch, how you doing?
Hey, Jeremy. How's it going? It's good to be back.
Ooh, I know it's been a whole week.
It
It's
feels
crazy.
like it's been a month, though. That's the weird thing.
Oh, I know it's crazy. I
Like,
mean, I kind of felt like what last week there was no live show. I was like
yeah.
kind of brokenhearted.
Although I have to say, the highlight
Mhm.
video was absolutely incredible. Plus, like those little snippets, the blast from the past from our
Yeah,
behind the scenes of our trip, that was
I
absolutely
know
amazing. So it
it
was
is
cool.
really cool.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
more about that. More about that coming soon. Actually, we're preparing some big stuff coming soon. So yeah, so let's just do a quick recap about
Mhm.
the episode for those who heard it, those who didn't, and then we're gonna bring in our special guest.
Awesome. Well, this episode was episode 11. It was all about multiple life purposes, which is really a continuation from 2 weeks ago, because there was no one last week, but from 2 weeks ago. And we talked a lot about pivoting, and I hope everybody's okay with the way we butchered the basketball analogy. But it's about, is it one thing that you have to focus on, or can there be many things? Can you change what you do throughout your life? And we talked a lot about pivoting, which is why our guest is a perfect guest for this week. So Yermi, why don't you bring her up?
Right here, there
Hey,
she is,
Krista.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
doing
Doing well.
well, doing well. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and share with us your wisdom. You have an incredible story that I know. You're doing incredible stuff. So
Thank
thank
you.
you again for so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is going to be a good conversation.
Oh yes, and it
Yeah.
definitely will. It's going to be really exciting. A not great. The podcast brain is already kicking in. A lot of great knowledge bombs we're going to be having tonight. But just to kind of get everybody to get to know you a little bit, I'm going to go through your bio really quickly here, and then we're going to kind of get to how you describe yourself and hear more about your story. But our
Yeah.
guest tonight is Krista Samimi. She is a mental wellness expert who helps individuals end burnout, level up in life, and create abundance. Oh boy, we're going to be having fun talking about burnout. Doing things differently with purpose, meaning, and intention are at the forefront of all that she does. After 17 years in the corporate world, she left pharmaceutical and healthcare sales to do things differently, not only professionally but also personally. What began as trying a holistic approach to her mental health grew into Krista finding a mission and a movement bigger than herself, which ultimately led to her mental wellness business. She shares her experience living with bipolar to destigmatize mental health disorders as a mental health advocate and speaker. Let me try that again. As a mental health advocate and speaker, she inspires others with her message of hope and healing and how success is entirely possible, even with a mental health condition. Today, she has a successful business where she helps high performers elevate their mental wellness via the gut-brain axis. That's going to be very important later on. She also leads a large team of wellness partners. Together, they are helping others discover their different and step into their strengths and passion and grow into their highest selves. Absolutely amazing. So much to talk about there. One of the reasons why I stumble so much over the bio is because as I'm reading it, my brain is like, oh, ask about that. Oh, ask about that. So that's why it's so hard for me to get through a bio without
Stay
butchering it.
focused.
Yeah, stay focused, exactly. But before we dive into all of those questions, I really want to hear from you in your own words. Who are you? What are you about? And really, like, what's your story? How did you get to where you are today, and where did you come from?
Yeah, well, I came from in terms of the work that I was doing, I worked in the corporate space for many years, almost 17 years. And after experiencing significant burnout, I mean, I just came to a point where even though I was making really good money, it just wasn't fulfilling. And I could no longer just collect a paycheck and be happy and great and grateful. Something inside me was like, I'm here to do something different. I'm here to, as my good friend Jen Russman says, turning your pain into power when you give it purpose. And literally, over the years, I've experienced mental health disorders, and it had greatly impacted me. And over the years, I've worked in the mental health space, but only volunteering. like I was a support group leader for about 3 years around like 2005. And like that felt like my purpose. Like every Wednesday I showed up for my support group. I led those people. We shared stories, we did all the things. And it was really gratifying because I felt like I was helping others and using what I had experienced to also help them. But that didn't pay the bills. And I kind of burnt myself out on doing that.
Right.
And so I was still in corporate. And then I started doing some volunteer work for NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And they had this really unique program called In Our Own Voice. And that just lit me up. I'm like, wow, they train you on, you know, like how to share your story. They set up speaking venues in churches, hospitals, schools. We went to high schools. And that, I literally say that got me through my corporate job for about 5 years because I was like on this speaking tour. I mean, I wasn't getting paid again, but it was volunteer, but it just really filled me up. And so I did that for about 5 years, just sharing my story. I even did it with my dad when he was living at the time. We would share our stories together as father and daughter. And I would have like grandmas come up to me at the end of the talk and they're like, oh my God, you remind me of my granddaughter and you give me so much hope that she's going to get out of her depression. Like, thank you so much. And like, that was like, you can't even put a price on that. And I was like, God, I wish I could like work in the mental health space and get paid for it. But I'm like, I don't want to go back and be a social worker and go back to school. Like I kept thinking that's, you know, when you overthink things and you try to figure it out, like it just doesn't come to fruition. And then I kind of like gave up on like the mental health space and just trudged along in corporate. And I ended up leaving my corporate job because I was actually working for a pharmaceutical company of all places. And I left because we moved up to a different area and my husband like still had his job. And I was like, okay, I'll just figure it out. Well, I started going on interviews and doing all the things that I'm like, I just don't want a job. Like I want something else. And it came at a time when I was kind of in a pretty low point. This was 2019. Jacob was only 2 years old. I didn't have any like postpartum depression after he was born, but something happened that I literally was just burnt out. But it's not like I was burnt out because I was working. I was burnt out because I wasn't working and I wasn't doing something that I was passionate about, anything that filled me up. I mean, I want to be so grateful because I have the most amazing husband and I had a 2-year-old at the time. And I kept thinking, why am I so ungrateful for my life? But just something was missing. And burnout is really like doing too much of not doing enough of what lights you up. Like it doesn't have to be like you're a workhorse and you work, and that's how you burn out. But like if you're not doing enough of what fills your cup, fills you up, you will burn out. And that's what happened in 2019. And coupled with, I'm diagnosed with bipolar, and sometimes with bipolar that you get like depression and you get down and out and not feeling like doing anything, unmotivated, that kind of stuff. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I do not want if I tell my psychiatrist, he's just going to give me another medication. And I didn't want that. So just at that time, my good friend was marketing on social media and I was scrolling through my phone and she was talking about this science of the gut-brain axis. And I'm like, my ears like perked up. I'm like, what is this? I'm like, this is amazing. Like, so I got in contact with her and learned about these holistic supplements that help for mental health and mental wellness. And long story short, that's how I got involved in Amari as a wellness partner, because I learned basically what started off as like a holistic approach to my mental health grew into me finding a mission and a movement much bigger than myself and an opportunity to be able to help others with their mental wellness through these supplements, through programs, all different things.
That's incredible. You know, one of the things there that's, you know, again, there's a couple things that stood out to me. Number one is, you know, a lot of people are starting to do it more often now, but what you clearly did, and something that I'm trying to do with my son as well, is, you know, taking ownership over who we are and our quote unquote conditions. Like, we have to own that. We have to own the hell out of that, because a lot of the stuff, if it's not something that's curable, it's part of who we are. So we need to learn to live life with it, but not suffer from it. But like,
Right.
no, this is part of who I am. This is how I identify it, and this is how I work on it or work through it. You know, obviously with my son being autistic, like, there's a lot of people who they're very closeted about their children or their own neurodiversity. With me, it's no, he's autistic, you know, and we're proud of that because it's part of who he is. So that was something, just owning it.
Yes,
You know,
owning and accepting. Like, it sounds
Right.
like you are
Yeah.
very accepting that this is what he has. It doesn't, you know, it's not right, wrong, different, whatever. It just is what it is.
Right.
And that's how I felt too. It's like, it took me a number of years. Once I just accepted I had bipolar and just take care of it, it makes things so much easier and manageable.
Because you're not fighting it. You know, it's like, okay, this is it. And we're going to walk hand in hand together. Another thing, though, that was, you know, very interesting, and to me it was very clear from your story, is, you know, we're talking about pivoting. That's what the episode today was all about. And, you know, that's one of the things we're going to be focusing on here, is this idea of pivoting and how really it's an art form. Your transition from corporate to where you are now was kind of like this slow progress of gently seeing things come into your life. And it's kind of like you said, like, I didn't go running after social work. You know, it was like this aspect of working within the mental health industry kind of found its way into your life. And it was kind of like this slow pivot and an easy shift into what you do now. So that was something that really, you know, stood out to me. That was cool. And I kind of want to highlight that for a second for everybody to see that it's not like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, so I'm going to dive into this. It's okay. What has your history shown you that is what you're really being called to do? And then how do you pivot into that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because the whole time, like I said, I was like, God, I really want to work in the mental health space, but I could only think like social work or you know, counselor, these kinds of things. I mean, I never in a million years would have dreamed up that this is what I would be doing. Like, it just, I kept putting that energy out there that, like, this is my calling, something in the mental health space.
Yeah. I want to just highlight one quick thing. I think we have to be careful with like what we title and what we label. I mean, just going back to when Jen was here with us and she was talking with us. I think it depends on what the situation is. So, for example, autism, which is very, very, you know, you tell it right away. You know, I had an interview today with somebody, and that person claimed they were autistic, and I was just not 100% sure. You know, and then ADD being thrown around so much again as well. A lot of these titles, you know, I was being called ADD, and I was looking at her, and I was like, okay, you know. First time in my life being called ADD, but anyhow, but not to downplay it. Obviously, you know, people who have ADD and people who really have bipolar and people who really have autism and people who have all these things, you know, we also have to be careful to not allow that to control our life at the same time, even though it is something. So, for example, I had a little bit of time where I went to the recovery rooms, and I personally had a very big issue when everybody stood up and said, you know, hi, I'm a recovering alcoholic or whatever. For those who just started in the program, yeah, they're recovering alcoholic, it makes sense. But there were people in there who were 20 years sober, who've never touched alcohol in 20 years, and they're still calling themselves alcoholics. And I'm like, you haven't, like, I don't know, you know, if I'm going to these kind of rooms, I'm going to recover. Like, I'm going to get healed in a sense. You know, it wouldn't make sense for me to go to a doctor and ask that doctor heal me and then still call myself sick, you know. So I think we have to have that really sensitive balance, still have like come from a place of, you know, emotional intelligence and come from a place of empathy at the same time. But we also cannot really label ourselves, you know, as this one category for the rest of our life, as long as we're doing the work and we're growing from it. I don't want to delve too much into it. I just wanted to highlight that, just to really kind of be careful about it. But I really admire your story so much, and
thank you.
it's just
I mean, I
incredible.
will say, like, on that topic, I'm learning to like. I mean, I have a diagnosis, right? I see a psychiatrist, but I'm not like. I know that the better I take care of myself, I can move away from that. Like I have to be really careful because I've had really profound experiences of having manic episodes that it's like, it's real, right? But the more I take care of myself, even though like my medications, like being on these supplements and being in a like-minded community with all this positivity has really poured into me that I'm like on 50% less medication than I was 3 years ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is super important. I mean, and thank you for bringing that up, because that is important. And it is a show that we have later on, where it's about the people that you surround yourself with, you know?
Oh yeah.
It's all about, you know, the similar feather, as we call it, you know, the birds of a similar
birds of a feather flock together.
Exactly. So jumping just right into it, our topic is the multiple life purposes. It is a continuation of the last episode that we had, where we were talking a lot about whether these purposes evolve. So it sounds like from the last discussion that we had, we focused on those evolvements of the purposes, and sometimes it sounds like I have this one purpose and it no longer serves me, and now I'm moving on to another purpose. Or I'm passionate about this today, I'm no longer passionate about it, now I'm moving on. This discussion is a little bit different. It kind of talks about, well, I have a purpose, I'm happy with my purpose, I'm happy with my passion, but is it possible that I have multiple purposes? Maybe I have another purpose, and is that okay to have a second purpose or a third purpose, or I don't know, however many purposes, you know? And I want to tie that in because of time and everything, to the art of pivoting. You know, how does pivoting play along with these multiple purposes? So, you know, I know like you were talking about in your career, how you went from corporate, you were volunteering with NAMI, you went to these speaking arrangements, and today you're pretty much doing almost the same, but in a different way, in a more fulfilling way. So how does these purposes kind of work with each other, and how do they pivot?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind on like how they work, I mean, we are constantly evolving. I'm the kind of person that like thrives on personal development, reading books, doing all the things. And so the person I was back in 2005 running those support groups is not the person that I am now. And so that's why a lot of pivoting takes place, because sometimes you outgrow, not in like a ego way, but sometimes you just like outgrow a certain purpose and you move on because you've evolved. And like when I was running the support group in 2005, and it was definitely feeding me, and I was really good at understanding people and offering, you know, solutions and stuff. But like I was not good at protecting my energy and my space. And so a lot of times I would come home from that group, as exhilarating as it was, I was like emotionally drained. I was like, oh. And then I would have to get up and go to work the next day because I was working a full-time job. So that's why it became to a point where after 3 years, as much as I love doing it, I was like, it's not paying my bills and it's not giving me health insurance like my corporate job. So I got to let it go. So things like that can just happen in life. Like I thought my purpose was be a support group leader for a long time, but after 3 years, that just wasn't the case. So that's one example of just kind of growing or realizing something's not for you, you know?
Sure.
And then same thing with the like being a speaker for NAMI. as much as I loved on my lunch hour to race over to the hospital and talk to a group of nurses and present and go to like a high school at night, that too, again, I didn't know how to manage my energy and to do good self-care so that I could wake up the next morning and be ready to go to work. Because back then too, my doctor had me on some like heavy medications, and working for a pharmaceutical company, I was like, I just thought that's what you do. Like, you just take medicine. Like, there's no other option. Like, this is what you do. So, it was a lot of times managing medications, and I'd be so drowsy and all of the things. So, just pivoting in life when you realize, okay, yeah, this was where I was supposed to be for a number of years, but things change. And so you have to be open to what's coming next, kind of like your next evolution of yourself.
So it's almost as if like your purpose changed and required the pivot, because your purpose developed as you personally developed.
Yes.
And the more that you personally develop, the more your purpose. It's almost like God saying, hey, we've capped you out over here, so now there's the next stage, which is a little bit bigger. Or, hey, you can only get to this next stage once you've kind of capped yourself out over here, and you've reached the potential you can in this area. So now it's time to move up. You can't hit level 2 until you finished level 1.
Yes.
I love that. Yeah, that's so true.
That's a very good way to describe it.
Because that's also what I heard. I'm sorry. Let's just hold on to that thought a second. Because I also heard that, and it's interesting because it kind of came to me just now when you were talking, that in order to find, let's say, your deeper, true, super passion, super purpose, you had to go through multiple different, purposes, still with that desire of, the self-growth, for example. That was the underlying driving factor, that passion, if you will. And in your situation, it wasn't that it was that same purpose evolving, but like Baruch so perfectly put it, you went through level 1 of a certain purpose. Then you kind of you finished that chapter. You went to level 2, you went to level 3, and now you're just killing it as you're just growing on these other levels. And you're, in a sense, leveling up, as Baruch likes to say, and I call it one up, and you're just constantly growing, which is incredible. So I love how that ties into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I even took my first stab at entrepreneurship in 2015. I had met this lady at a conference, and she was running her own business, and she wanted me to be like her sales and marketing person. And she really talked a great talk, and I bought into it. So this is when I was just working in healthcare, a different, not the pharmaceutical job, but I was like, oh God, something. So I left, a very good salary, and my husband still had his job, but I left a very good salary to go work with her. And then at the time, I was also really curious about holistic solutions for my mental health. Again, I've been seeking these, many years before I found Amare. And so I worked with her for about 4 or 5 months, and she was major high stress, and she was stressing me out. And I had gone to like a holistic psychiatrist to make some changes, and I didn't let my other psychiatrist know. But long story short, this doctor was taking me off my medications, and she was very confident that it wouldn't be a problem. Well, it became a problem because this lady was stressing me out. Wow. And that was 2015. So I ended up in a psychiatric hospital for 30 days. And I was like devastated when I came out, because I had left my job. I bought what this lady was selling me, basically. And so I bring this up because I was like, I felt like a failure. I'm like, okay, entrepreneurship is definitely not for me. I need to go back and do the JOB and like all of this stuff. And I was in a really bad place. So fast forward, 4 years is when I started taking the Amare supplements, and I was like, oh my gosh, no, maybe entrepreneurship second time around is better, right? And so because I was so burnt out on commuting. And I
Sure.
just thought that like going to work was like a waste of time. Like I was like, I could do this exact same thing at my house. Like I
Right.
always wanted to work from home, have my own hours, have my own flexibility, be doing something that truly mattered. And like I would just be so ungrateful at my job. I would just be like, this is the biggest waste of time. Why are they having us do this, this, and this, you know? And
Right.
so I got a second chance at entrepreneurship.
That's awesome.
Wow.
So one of the things that you mentioned, and one of the things that we have as a topic, so you talk about like this, the gut brain axis,
Mhm.
and I want you to talk more about that. But one of those things, you know, we always hear, oh, trust your gut, listen to your gut. What is your gut telling you? The only thing my gut ever really tells me is that it's
Time to
hungry.
eat.
Yeah, it's time to eat. Like that's about it. But so like to say,
Mine
listen to
too.
your, yeah, okay, so we're on the same page. So though, but we know it means something different. You know, it's kind of like trust your instincts. But I would love to hear from you. What is listening to your gut? What does that mean to you? How does it? I guess what does it feel like? What does it sound like? But
Yeah.
what does it mean? And how do you know when what your gut is telling you is the right thing, or when it's not the right thing? And then what is the
Yeah.
connection between your gut and your brain? Because clearly there is.
Yeah. It's definitely, I've learned a lot about the gut in the last couple of years. And your gut does know what's up, just like when when you say you have like butterflies in your stomach and you're feeling a little nervous, or
Mm-hmm.
it's like a nervous twinge or like an exciting twinge in your gut.
Right.
Like your gut is like constantly sending signals all throughout your body and especially to your brain. So the gut brain axis, our gut is made up of all of our digestive organs, everything from the esophagus down, your stomach, your intestines, all of that is your gut. And it has trillions of bacteria in there, some good bacteria, some bad bacteria, and all kinds of signaling is going on. So the gut talks to the brain via the axis.
Mm-hmm.
That's your vagus nerve. And so things like dopamine and serotonin are feel good neurotransmitters are actually like 80 to 90% of them are made in the gut.
Wow.
So if, somebody is not feeling themselves and they're feeling low energy or a little on the, depressed, unmotivated side, it could be like a gut issue that like their serotonin and dopamine is not being actively produced. Pharmaceutical companies want you to believe that it's all in your brain. It's a chemical imbalance in the brain. That's what I was taught. But taking care of your gut and nourishing it with good food, good nutrients, supplements, lowering your stress, all of that is so good for your gut, and that will affect how you feel.
Right. So, I mean, it's probably why, when I'm in a sour mood, I like to eat, because it's me falsely thinking that by putting food in my body, it's going to, give my gut what it needs. But really it's, when you're coming to those big decisions, like every time you had to make that transition, right? So what was that like? And then how did like trusting your gut tie into that? Like, how did that come into play? And then it's really interesting that in the end you ended up in this gut brain access business. So, but like,
I will
making those
say that
decisions?
I am definitely like more self-aware. Like when I'm making decisions now compared to before, like years ago, like now I can like just sit and get quiet for a second and go, and then I say the one thing that like I want to do, like, okay, I wanted to buy a ticket to this conference. How does that sit with me? Like, what do I feel in my body? Years ago, I would never have like been that self-aware to like ask the question to myself. I was the kind of person that had to go and call 5 different friends and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think? Well, they have no connection to whatever it is, but I was constantly pretty regularly just looking outside of myself to find the answers. When now 90% of the time I can just go within and find my answers.
That's powerful.
I find it so incredible that there's like this whole system, I guess, working like in the core of our body.
Yeah.
Sort of like not telling us what to do, but kind of like indicating to us what is safe, what is healthy, what is good, what is bad. Like always a lot of people who used to say like, wow, you're so good at anticipating certain things, for example, I share this a lot, the story of how we moved to North Carolina from California, um, I literally was the first of my group. We were a group of like 15 to 20 sort of community members, families, and stuff. And I was the very first to move out, and I was the first to say, "Yeah, this pandemic is pretty much here to stay for a little while," where everybody was like, no, it's only going to be 2 weeks and another 2 weeks and another 2 weeks. And before you know it, it's the 2 to 3 years that pretty much that's what I said was going to happen. And then by now, everybody left California, mostly, and they're all moved away. And just the other day, I was in Florida and there was a handful of them there. And I looked at them and I was like, so who's the crazy one now? So, but I like, it's funny how I really attribute it to the self-awareness of things, because I always do, like I sit and I meditate a lot and I really like take the time to see how, I mean, like when psychologists tell you, well, how do you feel about that? I don't think they really, touch to the core of what it really means to how do you feel about that? You know what I mean? And it's funny how that's so related to the gut. And before I met you, actually never sort of made that connection. It was like, yeah, good feeling, whatever.
Yeah.
But you really educated me a lot about, the gut is a seriously real thing, like,
Yeah. I mean, it regulates. I mean, I even put my mother-in-law, who's like 82,
Wow.
and she has type 2 diabetes, and her doctor wanted to give her another medication. Her hemoglobin A1C was only like 7.2, it wasn't super high. And I'm like, no, I could just start her on these probiotics. It'll balance her blood sugars, manage her cortisol levels. Cortisol is actually also made in the gut. So if you're stressed, it's coming from your gut.
That's my problem.
Yeah, so I literally put her on my probiotics, and 3 months, her hemoglobin A1C came down to 6.7, and she's good. Like, she didn't change anything else. She just took care of her gut a little bit.
Wow. And it's incredible that we forget that, God made us a very specific way where my father dedicated his life to the connection between your physical body and your spiritual soul. And there's a huge connection there. And one of the parts of his practice was, somebody would come to him with a physical ailment and he would be able to pinpoint what was spiritually lacking from their life, what part of their service of God or whatever, whatever it was spiritually that was missing. And of course, the healthy eating habits was a huge part of that. And we forget that, before all these I love that we're going after the pharmaceutical industry. It's so great. We're going to make some enemies, but, before all these big medications came around, things were done differently. People lived off the land, or they were just more in tune with alternative. I love it's alternative. Like this was the original way of being healthy.
Yeah.
It's like, how is my body feeling
Slowly,
today?
the gut health stuff is becoming more mainstream, but still.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That is incredible. So we are at the half mark of the show. This is typically when we talk about the clubhouse that we have set up. So we have the show in the morning. We have the live show today, and tomorrow, Thursday at 7 p.m., we invite our audience to now give us their input and to have their voices heard, to talk about the same topics. And we like to highlight everybody and their voices are heard, and we make sure that everybody has a part in this show, because it's the audience who make up this show. And thank God we have an incredible group of people who show up consistently, and we always have new people show up.
Nice.
So this is the time when we invite all the ones who are watching to our clubhouse tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern time. There are links that we share. If you want, you could go to the clubhouse. It's the Exceptionally Irresistible Club, and you're going to see the show that's there and just join the room.
Nice.
And as we wrap up, you know, you had such a journey, Krista, and you know, like you're definitely the person to talk about not doing something, the same thing forever. Um, but there's a lot of people who are really afraid of like changing and moving a career or something like that. um either from your experience or from your knowledge or whatever. um let's talk a little bit about doing the same thing forever and sort of wrap up the show with kind of that discussion and see, you know is it a purpose thing, or is it a like a fear of change thing? Where do you see it from?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it obviously depends on the person, but like, the end of the day, we get one go at this life. And if
Mhm.
you're in a career or a job where you're miserable and you're just there, I mean, I know we all need to pay bills and everything, but there are like, especially now since the pandemic, there are like a million and one ways to earn an income online. And
Mhm.
so you can either just be grumpy and frumpy and all of the things and just stay where you're at, or you can reach out to people and
Right.
figure out some other options, something that's more aligned with who you are. And I would always invite people to take like the human design test to see like
Mm.
what your human design is and what things that light you up and what your passions are. Um, Jen Russman introduced me to the human design. I'm a manifesting generator. So
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, the life is too short to do anything that makes you unhappy. You should be doing things that make you happy, that you feel fulfilled. And I just remember those days when I was, it was probably 10 years into the pharmaceutical company, and I would like be looking at my 401k and collecting my paycheck and going, okay, this is the age I retire. And I'm like,
Mm.
I can barely get to Friday. And I can't imagine like doing this for like 20 more years.
Well, yeah.
Right.
You'll just burn out, and then you're not going to really enjoy life and do things. But there's so many things you can even do alongside like a regular job. Like the work that I do, I have wellness partners on my team who just work this 5-6 hours a week, earning
Mm.
an extra $500 a month, pays for some groceries. And then, you just never know where that might lead. But there
Right.
are plenty of people in MRA doing full-time incomes. In fact, making way more than my manager at Pfizer
Wow.
is.
Wow.
Mm.
So you know what the number one most Googled question or term, and I think it was either in the last year or the last 2 years. You know what it
Yeah.
was?
How to make money from home.
Yeah, how to make money from home, how to have an online business, because like that's
Mhm.
the thing, especially
That's where
nowadays.
we're moving.
Yeah, and Jeremy
It's
and
a
I were just
waste of
talking about
time
this.
driving places, and you
Yeah,
don't need to like be in boardrooms, and like you can do Zoom.
right. And
Yeah.
Jeremy and I were talking about this last night about how I lost a thought. How the way education is going, people are waking up and realizing that, and no offense to anybody in college or anybody that went to college or believes in college, but college is no longer as valuable as it used to be. And if you really, and you look back and you see when was the modern day school system established the way it was, it was during the Industrial Revolution because it needed factory workers. But before that, everybody was entrepreneurs. You had your tailor, you had your butcher, you had your baker, everybody was entrepreneurs. So, and then we got programmed to do this kind of like mass way of living. And so there's a huge fear. I'm not
Mm.
negating that. There's a huge fear of going full on into entrepreneurship. Right now I'm holding on to my day job of teaching because there's this massive, you know, um, pivot, so to speak, that would have to be made to go into full-time coaching. And thank God for Yermi, because he's helping me make that transition slowly and smoothly.
Nice.
But and I think that the thing is that we all have to be aware, just aware of what's going on in our life and what directions we're being led. Because I think I was either telling you this the other night or I was telling somebody else that a number of years ago I saw myself wanting to be an educational consultant, working with schools, working to build up schools. And I wanted it now. I wanted it right away, but it just never led that way. We also knew that, my family, we wanted to get out of New York, but we never found the right opportunity. But we knew that I wanted to be an educational consultant, and we knew we wanted to be out of New York. So what happens is, this year we ended up moving to Dallas because of my son. So God got us out of New York, which is the first step. And now certain things are presenting themselves as opportunities for me to finally be that role of that educational consultant. Now, I thought it was going to be here in the school where I'm at now, which is a brand new startup school. And I thought that this would be the school that I get to help build from the ground up. But there's certain opportunities that are in other places that are popping up. And it's okay. So maybe that's actually what the school I'm really helped to really build. But God needed to get me out of New York first, because otherwise I wouldn't have gone to that other place where they're building the school. So, this whole thing of pivoting and doing the same thing forever, it's that slow process. And then just being aware, like you were talking about, being aware of what is your body telling you, being present and in the moment. And okay, what am I thinking right now? What am I feeling internally, not externally? But it's also like with those life decisions, it's okay, what can I notice around me? What are the puzzle pieces that are coming together? Because again, your story is very clear. The transitions were there. It was step by step by step, but you could never have planned it so perfectly.
No.
Right.
It had to happen.
And it's like when you release the how, like if there's something you want to manifest in your life or call in, like whatever that thing is, like you have to just release to the universe, to God, whoever, the how. Like how's this all going to happen? Like you can't get, in those details. Just trust that this is what you want and it'll manifest, but it may not look like you're thinking it's going to look like.
Yeah. I mean, it's also a whole other discussion about, people who are stuck in their jobs. They're becoming miserable in their jobs. A big part about, like what I do is that first you need to find happiness in whatever it is that you're doing. Because you're going to hear a lot of people and they're going to say, oh, if I only had this kind of job, or if only I had this, if only I had that, then I'll be happy. Well, guess what? It's actually through your happiness that you're going to get that thing. So you kind of have to work on happiness, and it shouldn't be tied to anything in the future. So with that being said, there is a very, very fine line of when you leave your job and how you leave your job and all these different things, because at the end of the day, yeah, we do need to pay our bills. And I know too many people who left their jobs and got careers in, whatever other profession it was, because hey, those professions do well and everything, but not long later they were miserable in that job. Because again, they didn't listen to their gut, or they didn't listen, or they didn't do, we spoke about it, the 7 whys. They didn't do different things of like how to find that real true purpose and that meaning and that fulfillment. So there's so many steps to just leaving a job. And in your description, you really described your story, that you found that and you graduated, let's call it, out of your job. So you're still involved with health. Clearly health means something to you. You understand it to a certain degree. But it was through NAMI, and it was through those volunteer stuff, and it was through all these things that you found your journey out of the job. And I think there are just a lot of people who are not courageous enough to take that step. And that's what Bark and I, that's a big thing of what we do and what we try to help people try to find that courage from within, to transition in a smart way, either find a better job or anything that really brings that meaning and purpose. And that's what this whole discussion is about. So people don't have to do the same thing forever. That's the good news. But it does take intention in a sense, my whole transition out of my job was very intentional. I was just lucky to have a really great boss who turns out a guy I grew grew up with and a good close friend of mine. So he knew me and he knew my vision, and the entire job, the entire 8 years that I was working there was in a sense a transition phase for me, towards where I wanted to be. And he supported it and he allowed it and he opened up the doors that I needed, you know. But that's just being lucky to have that kind of job. Not too many people have that. But in a sense, we have to set up our life that is very intentional and to find that direction. So if anybody knows of people who are struggling, or who are going through that difficulty, reach out to Baruch or myself and we could have that talk. And Krista, could you share a little bit more about, your business, the stuff that you're doing, and we're going to wrap up from there and kind of how people could reach out to you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I basically help, high performers, people that are doing the thing, but they feel burnt out. They just feel like they could improve on their mental health and wellness. And we have holistic supplements that address specifically the gut-brain axis. So addressing the gut-brain axis optimizes things like digestion, your mental focus, how you sleep, definitely impacts stress levels. And yeah, so I have customers, and then I also have a team of wellness partners. Right now I have about 30 wellness partners. It's network marketing. So if you're, anyone out there, if you're interested in, building a stream of income that's residual, we can definitely chat. But yeah, so I basically have customers, wellness partners. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I started a TikTok. Oh my gosh. That's a whole nother
That's
world.
impressive.
Yeah.
Making all kinds of videos.
Nice.
But yeah, that's about it.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Absolutely awesome. And it's so incredible, again, like what can be done nowadays on the direction that business is going. Oh my gosh, there's so much more to talk about. But you know what? I'm just going to say thank you so much for everything that you've shared, because I have my notes as usual, and I'll be going through the recap. I don't know, this for me has been so impactful, and and learning about it, and now I'm going to have to be speaking to you more about this idea of the gut brain axis. But I am, again, just thank you for being here, and thank you to all those who have joined us in the comments. Thank you all for joining us here on the show, for contributing. We are going to have your contact info and how people can get a hold of you, LinkedIn, your websites, and everything like that, in the show notes. So on behalf of everybody here, thank you. Jeremy, anything else to say?
That's pretty much it. You said it all. And guys, you want to follow Krista. She has awesome content on LinkedIn. Really educational. I highly, highly encourage. I believe every Tuesday she also has a live show of her own. I do my best to follow up. Just we share a time slot that I also am live at that time. But for most part, I do follow up, and I absolutely love her stuff.
Thank you.
It's so educational. So
thank you both.
Highly, highly advised. Highly advised.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, we'll see you all tomorrow night, or we won't see you, but we'll hear you all tomorrow night at the Clubhouse, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Time, because they're switching things again now. And looking forward to having a wonderful and great, inspiring discussion with all of you. Have a great night.
See you all. Bye.